October is officially spooky season. And you know what that means, right? Horror games. Games that'll scare you to death with just how good they are. But the scariest part is with the Steam Deck, you can take these horror games outside and scare everyone else around you in public. Embarrassing, right? As per usual, we will be discussing games and focusing on games that I think will run pretty well on Steam Deck. And towards the end of the video, we'll talk about games that I don't think will run well at all on Steam Deck. And maybe by the end of this year, we can tally up how many of these I got right and how many of these I got wrong. That said, before we start with this video, if you like this video or any other video, please like, subscribe, and share with all of your friends. Spreading the gospel of high-tech lowlife lets the YouTube algorithm know that you want more of my content. The first game is Kill Knight. It's a top-down survival shooter. It's kind of like Vampire Survivors almost, you could say. I've run the demo and the demo runs great on Steam Deck and the aesthetic looks great. The game feels extremely smooth as well. And there is depth to the combat. As stated before, there's a demo and I've ran that demo on Steam Deck and the demo runs great, so hopefully the full game runs just as well. Kill Knight releases on October the 2nd. I know it's like the cool thing to hate on Sword Art Online, but I've heard the games are actually quite good. And yes, it's even more like an MMO than it was before with multi-man raids. Noah from Steam Deck HQ actually put out an article talking about Sword Art Online Fractured Daydream, and it seems like it runs pretty well. Performance does get worse when you have to throw in multiple other players as well though. But of course, as per Noah's own article, this was just a network test. There's always a chance that this game could run even better during its full release. Sword Art Online Fractured Daydream releases on October the 3rd. Wizard of Legends 2 abandons the old 2D pixel art and goes for a more 3D aesthetic. And to be honest, I kind of prefer the 2D aesthetic, but that's just me. It's kind of odd, it might just be me, but it seems like indie games are going through their own 3D transitioning phase. Like every 2D franchise must try 3D. Kind of like what happened with the PlayStation 1's release. Anyways, there is a demo on Steam Deck and I've tried the demo on Steam Deck and it worked pretty well. I don't really have that much to complain about performance wise, but given that it was a demo, there's a good chance that a lot of the more crazy synergies weren't available to me. And this game also releases on October the 3rd. I'm on record saying that I'm quite bad at racing games, and that is still true. I'm less bad at arcade racing games, but it's still pretty bad. It's a miracle that I can even drive in real life, right? But regardless, Victory Heat Rally looks pretty fun, and I really want to give it a shot. It's been a while since I've played a good arcade racing game, aside from like Mario Kart, and honestly this might be right up my alley. And it looks like it runs well on Steam Deck as well. Yes, this game also releases on October the 3rd. Until Dawn is the next big PlayStation game that isn't Bloodborne that's coming to PC. I've played the original and it's a good time with a bunch of people right next to you, like at a party. Yes, these sorts of games are best enjoyed when streamed to your audience, or when you have a bunch of people around you in real life, or if you're just on like a Discord call with your friends. You can choose to make the wrong decisions together. If you really think about it, Until Dawn is basically a visual novel. But unlike most visual novels, this one has graphical fidelity. And yes, it makes me wonder if this game will run well on Steam Deck. I'm sure with the proper amount of porting it will. That said, it is basically a visual novel, so performance isn't super important in this case, but still. And Until Dawn releases on October the 4th. And just in time for Halloween, it's time to talk about one of the founding fathers of modern survival horror, Silent Hill. Silent Hill, in my opinion, has never really been known for its combat or anything of the sort. It's been more so known for its plot, and also the main plot twist of what Silent Hill truly is. And also the funny endings. I am interested in seeing how this game will turn out, but I'm more interested in seeing how this game will run on Steam Deck. Due to the more low-key nature of horror games, they tend to run a little better on Steam Deck. And yes, I have faith that this game will run pretty well on Steam Deck, if you ask me. The Silent Hill 2 remake will release on October the 7th. And on the topic of horror games, or rather horror-themed games, Diablo is definitely one to talk about. And the newest expansion, Vessel of Hatred, is coming out pretty soon. And yes, it comes with the brand new class, the Spiritborn, said to be a master of hand-to-hand combat while using 4 Spirit Guardians. What this actually entails in-game, no one knows, but all we really need to know is that it's more Diablo. And yes, there will be an additional campaign, an additional region, but let's be perfectly frank, no one cares about the story, at least not after like the first day of playing the game. I can't even remember what happens in the base game. In my opinion, Diablo 4 has really turned itself around, and it's become good again. Anyways, this expansion releases in October the 8th. Glyphica Typing Survival is like a mixture of Vampire Survivors and the Typing of the Dead. The idea is of course that you would use your keyboard to type out words to then kill your enemies. While the game is intended for keyboard players, you could play this on the Steam Deck using the Steam keyboard. Dual trackpad typing is a great way to type on your Steam Deck, but to really test your limits, you'll want to try out some sort of typing game on it. And this looks like the perfect typing game. While the game may look complex, the game certainly doesn't look complex, and as such doesn't look graphically intense, and as such should run pretty well on Steam Deck, at least till you make it to endgame. Glyphica releases on October the 9th. I'm not entirely sure if I've talked about this game in the past, but what the heck, I'll talk about it again. Guild Saga is a tactical turn-based RPG, and I am a sucker for tactical RPGs. Stuff like Fire Emblem and Disgaea are my bread and butter. And yes, this game looks like it'll be just as fun. As for whether or not it'll run on Steam Deck, I have no reason to believe that it won't run on Steam Deck well. But I will say that this is releasing in early access, so the full game won't be out for a while, but if you want to play the early access version, then that releases on October the 10th. And one of the biggest releases this month is Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, a callback to the old Budokai Tenkaichi games. I wanted to like Xenoverse, but at the same time, all I really wanted to play was just more Budokai, and this is that. Even though by no means is it a realistic looking game, it does look quite graphically intense. So I would wager that you'd have to reduce the graphics down to low to really get it to run on Steam Deck. But I do think it'll run on Steam Deck. The other big question is whether or not Bandai Namco will implement easy anti-cheat into this game, and if they'll make it work on Steam Deck. It's always a possibility that it might not work, but there's always a possibility that it will work. Sparking Zero releases on October the 10th. Another major release is Metaphor ReFantazio, the next big JRPG from Atlus. Some game journalists might call it Persona without the heart, but I would argue it's more like Persona, but more high fantasy. There is a demo available, and yes, I've tried it, and yes, it runs quite well on low settings. Yes, the demo runs quite well on Steam Deck, but that doesn't guarantee that the full game will. But, you know, seeing the demo run as well as it does gives me hope that the game will be even more optimized and will run even better. Maybe we'll get to increase the graphical quality. But of course, if you're fine with 30 FPS, you could always increase the graphical quality as well. And you know, given that it's a JRPG, frame rate isn't super important for combat and actual gameplay. But yeah, and Metaphor also releases on October the 10th. Decline's Drop is a 2D action platformer with the gameplay of something like Super Smash Bros. When you advertise a game as combat oriented, it really makes me wonder how deep the combat system can really be. These sorts of games are just begging to be labbed and played and tested to their absolute limits to see what sorts of combos I can do. Kinda like Slave 0x. Personally speaking, I don't see this being a difficult game to run on the Steam Deck. You never know, but that's just me. And it's another release that you should watch out for on October the 10th. Neva is a brand new action-adventure platformer made by the same guys that made Gris or Gree or however it's supposed to be pronounced. The game does look great, but honestly, I don't really know much about how the game is supposed to play, so there isn't much I can say about that. What I can say though is that this game looks great, but I will say that this game doesn't look super graphically demanding, which means it looks like a great fit for the Steam Deck. And this game releases on October the 15th. No More Room in Hell 2 is a survival horror experience for up to 8 players. It looks like one hell of a time, especially if you play with a full party of 8 people. That said, we don't really know how this game will scale down, so it's hard to know whether or not this will run on Steam Deck or not. But I'm sure with turning everything down to all low settings, you can play this game on Steam Deck just fine. At least, probably single player. Multiplayer might be a different experience. So we don't know for certain if there's any room for this game on the Steam Deck, but if it ends up running well on the Steam Deck, then you should make room for this game. And this game releases on October the 22nd. Streets of Rogue 2 promises to be a truly immersive RPG sandbox in a randomly generated open world. I've yet to actually play the first one, but this one looks super intriguing to me. Any game that promises lots of possibilities for any action you take is a must-have in my opinion, and I hope that this game really delivers on that fantasy. The game does look like a more enhanced version of the original, and the graphics do look slightly better, but I don't think it's a big enough increase to say that this game wouldn't run well on Steam Deck. I still think this game would run great on Steam Deck. Anyways, this game releases on October the 22nd. You know, I've always thought that Rivals of Aether 1 was among some of the best Smash-likes out there, and it looks like Rivals of Aether 2 might be as well. You know, I didn't like the fact that they called this Rivals 2, but I guess since Marvel Rivals released, they gotta switch back to Rivals of Aether 2, which I think is a better title anyways. So I do understand that some people bought Rivals of Aether 1 for the workshop support, and I also did the same as well. But this game is launching without workshop support, which of course means at launch no custom characters. But honestly, the game is fun enough to play, and furthermore, while the game went from 2D to 3D, it still looks like it runs quite well. It'll probably run really well on Steam Deck, but are you ready to destroy your Steam Deck controller with Rivals of Aether 2? Probably not, right? Anyways, this game releases on October the 23rd. Also releasing on the 23rd is Romance of the Three Kingdoms 8 Remake. Are you ready for more adaptations of classic Chinese literature? If you liked Black Myth Wukong's take on Journey to the West, then you'll probably like this game's take on Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the second most famous Chinese novel. I do think it's funny that Koei Tecmo develops this and also Dynasty Warriors, which is another game based on Romance of the Three Kingdoms. I'm not entirely familiar with this franchise, but what I do know is that it's a turn-based strategy game. It might be like Civilization, but I'm not entirely sure. While I don't think performance is super important, I do think this game will run pretty decently, all things considered. Card NCL is a deck building roguelike, but made by Inti Creates, and it's also a massive crossover between all their properties. You know, I'd be lying if I said this didn't look like Battle Network, but outside of having a 3x3 grid and taking place in a digital world, the similarities kind of end there. By all accounts, it's far more turn-based than the original Battle Network, which was real-time. But this game does look quite fun, and I really do want to give it a shot. And yes, I have no reason to believe this wouldn't run well on Steam Deck. Card NCL releases on October the 24th. I must confess, I've never ever played any of the Romancing Saga games, so you might have to forgive me for my ignorance, but this game does look pretty interesting. It's also supposed to be a non-linear JRPG. I'm curious as to how that would work out, but whatever, I guess we'll find out when the game fully releases, or I guess I could play the original game right now. As for whether or not this will run well on Steam Deck, I mean, yes, I think it will. And this game also releases on October the 24th. You know, I don't know how long it's been since I've played a true 3D Sonic game, and I think it's about time I jump back in, especially when Shadow is coming back. It truly is the year of Shadow, and I think it's high time I get back into a Sonic game. The original Sonic Generations runs pretty well on Steam Deck, but there's no telling if this one will. I don't know if this one's that much of a graphical improvement or not, but I do still think it'll run pretty well on Steam Deck. You might have to lower the graphics and whatnot though. And yes, this game is also slated for release on October the 24th. Speaking of games I haven't played in a while, I haven't played a Ys game in a while. I think the last Ys game I played was The Oath in Felghana for the PSP. Man, I have to say, this series has progressed quite a bit, but it still looks like it'll run great on Steam Deck. It doesn't look super graphically demanding or anything. And Ys Nordics releases on October the 25th. They're making a sequel to Life is Strange, and they're going back to the original protagonist, Max. Now let's be perfectly clear, this is going to be a hot take, but Life is Strange is definitely a visual novel. Yeah, sure, it's 3D and like you walk around and all that stuff, but it's basically a visual novel gameplay wise. And as such, gameplay wise, the frame rate doesn't really matter too much in this case. You could easily run this at 30 FPS and you'll be fine. You could probably lower the graphical detail as well. This visual novel is set for release on October the 29th. And of all of the games coming out this spooky season, this might be the scariest one of all. Meta Soulmate. It's not really a game, it's more of like a character anime girl modeler. I've tried the demo out on Steam Deck, and yes, while it does work and run pretty okay on the Steam Deck, these sorts of not a game applications really should be ran and used on a desktop where you have a full keyboard and mouse, especially if you want to import files and stuff. This Not a Game releases on October the 29th. Dragon Age the Veilguard is also another major October release, and to be honest, I've never played a Dragon Age game at all. But this one does look fun with its more action-oriented combat, but to be honest, action games need more depth than just better gear does more damage, because that's not really depth, that's just an RPG. And yes, this game releases on Halloween. Shadows of the Damned is a game I never thought would be remastered, or in this case, hella remastered. It kind of vaguely plays like the original Resident Evil 4, but with extra Suda51 wackiness. I guess it also helps that they had Shinji Mikami here. The original was never on PC, and now we're getting a PC release. And to be honest, it does look better than the original Xbox 360 version, but not so much as to be completely unplayable on the Steam Deck, which I think this will be plenty playable on the Steam Deck. And this right here is another Halloween release. And last but certainly not least, Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered. I do find it odd that they chose to remaster this game, given the game still looks very modern. That said, remasters these days tend to also include some quality of life fixes, so there's that as well. That said, if you do own the original on Steam, the upgrade should only be $10, which is actually a pretty decent deal if you're someone that wants to upgrade. I do wish Sony focused on some of their other IPs that they just haven't done anything with. Like Bloodborne, obviously, but there's also a million different other IPs from the old venerable Japan studio that Sony used to helm. You know, I think people would kill for a Shadow of the Colossus PC version. I think they'd also kill for a God of War original trilogy as well. You know, stuff like that. As for whether or not the remake will run well on Steam Deck, it's hard to know for certain, but if it's as scalable as the current port, then sure, it'll probably run well on Steam Deck. And this also releases at the end of this month. Now let's talk games releasing in October without a definitive date. This right here is Sulphur, extraction shooter styled roguelike game, and honestly, it looks like a lot of fun. A lot of modern indie shooters are taking cues from the boomer shooter era, but I'm digging the more deliberate, slower pace of this sort of game. At least it looks slower paced, in my opinion. Lots of equipment and attachments to equip onto your weapons as well. It looks quite fun. It looks like a great fit for the Steam Deck, and it looks like it might run quite well as well. I would recommend getting gyros set up. But anyways, this game releases in October, but there's no official date just yet. And yes, there's a demo. Also releasing in October without a definitive date is a brand new Ninja Turtles game. Dude, the Ninja Turtles used to be so cool, and honestly, they still are pretty cool. I'm more of a sucker for the 2003 iteration of the Ninja Turtles, but you know what, this one is pretty cool too, and it's based on the new movie that just came out. And it looks like a great fit for the Steam Deck. And yes, this releases sometime in October, as stated before. And now I think it's time we talk about games that probably won't run on Steam Deck. This right here is Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and this looks like this could be the most fun COD in a long time. The big problem though is that Call of Duty has been using Activision's own Ricochet anti-cheat, which is a kernel level anti-cheat, which yes, does not work on Linux, and by extension the Steam Deck. So this game is already going to be unplayable on Steam Deck. And as far as I'm aware, you can't even play the campaign either due to the anti-cheat. So yeah, there's that as well. This game is slated for release on October the 24th. All in all, we have an excellent month of games, featuring many different types of games, but most notably a bunch of horror games that I couldn't cover today. There's a sheer volume of games that look like they'll run quite well on Steam Deck. Never count out the Steam Deck, at least until the Steam Deck 2 comes out. So now, quick question. Which of these games terrify you the most? And if I forgot a game, please tell me what game is going to terrify you instead. If you like this video, please press the like button and check out our other videos. And if you like those other videos as well, be sure to press the subscribe button and share the good gospel of high-tech lowlife with your friends. Furthermore, we have a community Discord for enlightened individuals such as you. And if you wish to further support high-tech lowlife, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Links in the description.